This is a real story that just happened to my friend and I recently, and I'm literally losing sleep over it. The two of us are still trying to process exactly what we saw yesterday. We've talked it through countless times trying to figure out logically how this was possible. The events of this story took place in Central Tennessee, USA, and hopefully someone from the area who hears this can help give us some thoughts and ideas as to what actually happened. I had just recently purchased a small fishing boat, and my good friend Legov and I were super eager to explore the lake and its many scattered islands. Yesterday, on the 4th of July, we decided to go fishing in a very secluded part of the lake that we had named No Man's Land, because of the low-hanging bridge that prevented other boaters from entering that section of water. My boat was able to make it underneath the bridge because of how small it is, and we decided to go deeper into the cove than we had ever ventured before. As we're slowly trawling down the lake, the path before us split into 3 forks, and I asked my buddy which fork we should take. Legov immediately answered the middle one, so we continued straight as the water changed from a large lake to more of a narrow river-like path. This is where a chain of events happened in quick succession that we've talked through after the fact multiple times to try and recall the order of exactly how things went down. First, we heard a strange vocal noise coming from the woods beyond the shoreline, and we both tensed up and began to feel very uneasy. "What was that?" Legov asked. "A dog," I said, as that was the first thing that came to mind. "I don't think that was a dog," Legov answered. Then we saw a bird high above us perched on a branch staring down at us. "Maybe it was that bird," Legov said. "Yeah, maybe." I'm not sure when it got in my hand, but at some point I had drawn my pistol from its holster and I was holding it down at my side as Legov tightly gripped his hunting bow next to me. We both had a very odd feeling as we drifted down the river, our eyes glued to the bank. We floated up alongside a rotting pine tree that had recently fallen and was now half submerged in the water, sitting on the shoreline. Then, it happened. All of a sudden, we hear an extremely loud, heavy animal running through the woods, getting closer and closer to the water. At first I thought it was a deer as it was almost prancing, but as it got closer and louder, we both realized that this was no deer. Emerging from the brush was a very large, jet black, canine type creature. My brain tried to make sense of what I was seeing and thought, oh, this must be a coyote, but this was much, much bigger, like a German Shepherd on steroids. It was incredibly fast, gliding across our field of view like a black shadow, leaping through the trees as it quickly approached the area of the bank closest to the two of us. Upon closer inspection, it didn't seem to have any texture or details to its body, almost like it was flat and blurry. We couldn't see its fur, its face, or even its eyes, just the outline of its body and tall, wolf-like ears. But it was obviously the body of a canine. Adrenaline began rushing through me as my brain raced and prepared me to defend myself. It looked as if it were charging directly at us. It was zigzagging through the trees, but very intentionally moving toward the exact portion of the shoreline that we were floating past. We were terrified, but the 15 feet of water between our boat and the shoreline gave us a little bit of confidence. It would have to swim out to us, and I didn't see that as being likely. It continued leaping through the woods and quickly reached our portion of the shoreline. In one majestic, fluid motion, it leaped off the shore and dove into the water right under the half-submerged pine tree in front of us. Boom, 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 splash, and that was it. We held our breath and listened intently as we waited to hear it swim or move closer towards us. Small ripples in the water slowly reached our boat from the splash. After the fact, Legoff swears that the splash should have been much bigger for a creature of that size. "Watch for it to come back up," I whispered. I had never heard of canines being able to fully submerge themselves under the water like that, but here it was happening right in front of my eyes. We waited and waited, but there was nothing. Pure silence. Just the subtle sound of the ripples in the water slowly dissipating. It was almost as if the entire forest had shut off. Our eyes were still glued to the fallen pine tree it had gone underneath. "Maybe it's just standing in the water under the tree," Legoff said. We got the courage to bring the boat a little bit closer to inspect the tree, but there was nothing. Not a single trace of the gigantic creature that we both had just witnessed. We were in complete shock, paralyzed. It's gone. How could it be gone? How does something that big just vanish? Especially a creature like that. After 30 or so more seconds, Legoff broke the silence with, "You saw what I saw, right?" An ice-cold shiver ran down my spine. "All of it," I replied. "Really, though, what the hell was that?" Legoff said. All I could think to say was, "I think we just saw a demon." We stayed floating near the shoreline for at least another 10 minutes, hoping to see some kind of a sign that would prove to us that we weren't crazy. Legoff scoured the waters looking to see if it would come back up for air, but it never did. Both of us being skeptics, we scrambled to find logical explanations for what we had just witnessed, but neither one of us could find one. If it had just splashed the water and gotten back out again, number one, we would have clearly seen it walk away, and number two, we would have heard it, as anything putting weight on the leaves makes a large amount of noise. But there was just silence. The loudest silence I had ever heard in my life. This story is completely true. We are not easily intimidated, and both of us are still very shaken up by this. So I'm not joking with any of you when I say, without a doubt, there is something in the woods of central Tennessee that completely defies explanation. If anyone has any insights that could potentially be provided about this case, it would be greatly appreciated if you could chime in down in the comments. When I was a junior in college, I lived in a fraternity house with over 40 other guys, and as you can imagine, getting any personal time for studying, relaxing, or peace and quiet in any form was beyond rare. I went to school in northern Michigan, and that December, just before Christmas break, one of my friends suggested we drive a few hours out of town to their family's cottage. The drive up to the cottage was absolutely breathtaking. Think of a Thomas Kincaid painting. We pulled into the driveway and began walking towards the entrance through 6 inches of soft, powdery snow. Once we got inside, we started to unload our groceries and began the dinner process, which I was in charge of. A small fire quickly began warming the cold interior of the old cottage, and I started cooking some steak and shrimp in the kitchen. As college kids, you can imagine the excitement and luxury we felt when we opened the freezer and saw it was stocked to the brim with steaks, shrimp, and chicken. The cottage was sitting about 50 yards from the water up on a slight hill. Our closest neighbor was over half a mile away, and the drive up from the main road was at least 300 yards. So we were nestled back in relative isolation. There had also been a steady snowfall that evening, and there was about 6 to 8 inches of snow on the ground surrounding the cabin and covering the deck. Tracks would have been easily seen as the exterior lights illuminated the entire surrounding area. Even sensor lights were installed along the side walkways. We felt as safe as a group of young boys could possibly be. We all had these smiles on our faces, knowing we were living the life. I remember us all listening to Every Little Thing She Does Is Magic by The Police on the radio. As a young man who grew up modestly, it was simply one of those moments, until it wasn't. Right as we were turning up the volume on the radio, we all heard 3 incredibly loud knocks on the back door. Our blood ran cold as we all turned to look towards the back of the cabin. It was so obvious that someone was at the back door. We all just stared at each other with terrified and confused looks. Who in their right mind was out on a freezing winter night in the middle of nowhere, banging aggressively on our door? Who could we possibly be disturbing? A chill ran down my spine, because I knew deep down that no matter who or what was at the back door, they weren't a friend of ours. My fraternity brother who owned the place gathered up his courage and ran to the back door to investigate. He quickly came running back full speed with a look of complete terror on his face. He looked at the rest of us and said in a low, serious tone, "Someone is in the house." The back door was slightly open, and it appeared as if whoever had made the 3 knocks on the back door had slipped inside the cabin without being detected. I cannot describe the fear that gripped me as my primal instinct to survive kicked in. What should we do? Grab the fireplace poker? A kitchen knife? What was this person's intentions? What were they armed with? Why had they knocked and announced their presence only to slip into a hiding place? The thought alone was more than disturbing. I can't stress how loud these knocks on the door were. It wasn't one of those "did you hear that" moments. It was a needle coming off the record moment, when everyone present arrives at the same thought at the exact same time and realizes something bad is about to happen. We did an extensive search of each room in the cabin, armed only with household items like I mentioned above. By the time we got back to the main room with the fireplace, we glanced outside to try and see any tracks that might be in the snow, expecting to see footsteps coming from the road or, God forbid, the woods. We were stunned to find that the snow was entirely undisturbed. The rear deck where the back door was located showed no sign of anyone walking up to the cabin from any direction. The steps, the deck itself, and the walkway leading up to it were all covered with at least half a foot of fresh snow, so how could there be no tracks or footprints whatsoever? What the heck was going on here? Whatever it was either still outside the cabin or it was inside the cabin and choosing to not show itself to us. We tried to rationalize what happened, and we decided that the old couple who had once lived there must not be very happy about their peaceful nightly routine being replaced with loud music and dancing college kids. However, this insight offered us little comfort. After we all finished eating an uncomfortably quiet dinner, we all slept in the master bedroom together on the same bed. The idea of being alone and coming face to face with whatever was lurking in that cabin was downright terrifying. As daylight broke through the trees, we all got a better look at the snow surrounding the cottage. Not a single flake seemed out of place. This story is 100% true, and believe me when I tell you, I will never forget those 3 knocks at the back door of the cabin in the woods.